Hello, Miami. Welcome, Jack. We have 12,000 Bitcoiners here.
You're incredible.
And I think there's 20,000 out there listening. So we're happy to see this phenomenon grow. I wanted to start with, I think, the big question that probably most people are asking. Why are you on stage with a human rights activist? What does Bitcoin have anything to do with human rights? Isn't it just about investment?
Not for me. I mean, for me, that like Bitcoin changes absolutely everything. And what I'm drawn to the most about it is the ethos, is what it represents, is how the conditions that created it are so rare and so special and so precious, and I don't think there's anything more important in my lifetime to work on, and I don't think there's anything more enabling for people around the world.
We often hear in our community that, yes, I agree. We often hear in our community this kind of mantra that like Bitcoin is for everybody, that it's like non-discriminatory, that it's really kind of opening for many people around the world who are walled off from whether it's transactions, saving, connecting with the world. What is your perspective on this idea that like Bitcoin is for everybody?
Well, I mean, that's what I'm focused on, making sure that I help with. Like whatever I can do, whatever my companies can do to make it accessible to everyone is how I'm going to spend the rest of my life. Like if I were not at Square or Twitter, I'd be working on Bitcoin. If it needed more help than Square and Twitter, I would leave them for Bitcoin. But I think I believe both companies have a role to play, and I think anything that we can do as companies to help also find the right intersection between a corporate narrative and a community open narrative is for the best.
The theme for today is banking the unbanked. As you all know, probably there's billions of people around the world who are either completely unbanked or they're underbanked. Yet the mobile phone is growing at a remarkable pace. So even in countries like Ethiopia and Sudan, you now have 20-25% of the population with a mobile phone. And in the next 5 years, that's going to pass 50%. So we're now in a position where the increase of technology is going to allow more people to come online. And with Bitcoin, it doesn't matter what passport you have or what nationality you are, what ethnicity you are, what you believe in, you can connect to this network. So when we think about banking the unbanked, what's your vision for like what is most important for helping onboard people into this new system?
Well, we don't need the banks anymore. And I mean, there's so much work to do around accessibility. There's so much work to do around education, so that people can own the idea themselves. And I want to thank you, by the way. I appreciate you so much for all the work you do to like take away a bunch of the myths that people have in their head and give a strong case for why Bitcoin can be used by everyone. But you know, it just like we don't need the financial institutions that we have today. Mm-hmm. We have one that is thriving, that is sound, that is owned by the community, that is driven by the community, that has this incredible and amazing consensus that always manages to do the right thing over time. It's noble, and it's so rare and so unique. So anything that we can do to build it and to protect it, we're down to do.
You recently personally launched a new fund with Jay-Z, where you guys dedicated 500 Bitcoin to help the Bitcoin ecosystem in Africa and India. Can you talk a little bit more about the vision for that fund and what you all hope to do over the coming years?
Yeah, I mean, I spent November of 2019 roaming around the continent of Africa. I went to Nigeria, I went to Ethiopia, Ghana, and I saw that the #1 problem that entrepreneurs were working on there, and I only met the entrepreneurs, I didn't meet anyone in the government or the media, they're all working on payments, and the most interesting of them were working on Bitcoin. And when I saw the reports of Nigeria considering banning Bitcoin, when I saw the reports of India considering banning Bitcoin, is a reminder that we could use a lot more help developing around the world, finding developers on the continent of Africa, enabling them to do their work without having to think about taking another job is important. So talking to Jay about it, Jay loves Bitcoin. He goes very deep on what he loves. He believes in it, and he also believes in this idea of making sure that if we're going to create a money for the world, it has to be developed around the world. And anywhere there are gaps, we should try to fill. So right now, we're trying to find the right board for it. It's going to be a completely separate entity. I have no control or say or direction over it. Once we find that board, they'll hire a lead, and they'll start making grants denominated in Bitcoin.
So Jay might have 99 problems, but being his own bank won't be one, huh?
He's more than a bank.
How let's speak a little more about that. Nigeria is a country of more than 200 million people. They have a 15% inflation rate. They are, in many ways, closed off from the outside world in terms of fintech payments. How has traveling the world and going to different countries kind of opened your eyes to the global impact of Bitcoin, where maybe people in like Wall Street, Silicon Valley, in London, may not be seeing? Like, what are they missing when they say there's no social value to Bitcoin? Like, what do you think they're missing?
I mean, they're missing everything. They're not getting out of New York. They're not getting out of the country. They're not talking to people. Go to Nigeria for one day, and see the struggle that people have to put up with their government and with their money. And go to Ghana, that has a bunch of transplants from all over the continent, and you witness the same thing every single day. Go to India, and you see the same.
Yeah, my advice is they should try living on like the Sudanese pound for like 6 months, and then come back and tell us that Bitcoin's not useful. And I think they'll get a little reality check there. So today we've got, maybe estimates vary, but anywhere from like 150 to 200 million people have used Bitcoin in some way, right? So we're at like maybe 2%, 2.5% of the world population. I believe we're going to 1 billion people by 2025, certainly by the end of the decade. And when you have so many more people on-ramping into the system, we're probably going to have a situation where the fees on the main chain of Bitcoin are going to get pretty high in fiat terms. So can you talk about, for people who, like in Nigeria and Sudan, other places, who are going to need micropayments, who are going to want to send $5, $10, can you talk a little bit about your commitment at Square to Lightning, how you kind of understood that Bitcoin will scale in layers, perhaps, instead of like just kind of on the main chain, and why you're so committed to Lightning in a time where we're going to get a lot more users?
Well, I mean, exactly. I mean, that's why I'm committed to Lightning, is because this is going to be used by more and more people. And my belief in Bitcoin, it's an amazing asset. But my belief is the internet needs a native currency. We need to be able to transact with this every single day, and everyone around the world needs to transact with it every day. So the only reason Square got into Bitcoin is to that end. It's not just to be an exchange. And that's why we don't deal with any other currencies or coins, because we're so focused on making Bitcoin the native currency for the internet. So it's meeting Elizabeth and team.
How can you say that this is a currency for everyone in the world when you are the king of censorship? Bitcoin is about decentralization, and you have no right to be here today speaking about this.
We're working on that too. We're working on that too.
We'll get to that. I get it. We get to that. Can you please? We'll get to that. I promise. Thank you.
We can talk about it. We can talk about it. We can talk about it.
Well, why don't we just go right to that? I was going to talk about it later. We hear a lot about censorship, right? maybe we'll let this settle down for a second. All right. No, we'll hit on that briefly. It's obviously very important.
We'll talk about it.
Can social media be more like Bitcoin? Bitcoin is censorship resistant. Nobody controls it. What is your thought on that? What is your thought on this? It's a thorny problem.
Yes, I do believe it can. I know there's a number of you out there who disagree with a lot of actions that Twitter has taken. I know there's a lot of I know there's a lot of you out there who disagree with our policies and the way we've evolved them. I appreciate that. I recognize it. I also recognize the fact that there is an incentive and a corporate incentive and a business incentive that is different than what might be needed for global communication, for public conversation. And my goal in my life in this moment is to remove as much as I can the corporateness of our companies and find better intersections with the open source community. Certainly, Bitcoin has taught me that with Square, and we're doing everything in our power. We're doing everything in our power to do that. And we're trying to do the same thing with Twitter by creating a new platform, a new open source standard called Blue Sky. We're just starting it. And it will have none of the restrictions that you see on Twitter. So inspired entirely by Bitcoin, we want to do the same thing for social media. And again, I know you're not going to believe me. I know you're saying liar. I'm going to prove it to you. And then we can have another conversation later.
Earlier, you brought up, this is very important. You brought up a point where y'all are Bitcoin only, right? Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? I mean, there's a lot of talk about proof of stake and other coins. Like, what are your thoughts on Bitcoin and its proof of work and full nodes model versus maybe other models?
I mean, again, like the conditions that created Bitcoin, everything that went into it, from the proof of work model to the development model, no single points of failure, everything about it is why we're into it. There's nothing else that compares to it. And we have no interest other than making sure that we are building a native currency for the internet and helping in every way that we can. So all the other current coins, to me, don't factor in at all.
And yeah, I just wanted to underline this for the audience here. Like, Bitcoin is about user control. Like, the users control the monetary policy. Like, you control it, you control it, you control it, I control it. There's not a small group of people controlling the monetary policy. And that's really what we're here for. We're here to create an alternative to this system, the fiat system, where a small group of people can basically determine, what the rules are. I just was in a meeting yesterday with an amazing guy named Fodé Diop from Senegal. He's telling me this story about how in the late 90s, he lives in a country that still uses the CFA. It's a French colonial currency, so the French from Paris control these people, and they make decisions on behalf of them. His father had saved up all this money for him to go to college, and the French just decided to devalue the currency overnight, and he could no longer pursue his dreams. That's why when he saw Bitcoin later, he was like so open to it and excited, and he said, this is my ticket out of here, right? So at the end of the day, you have to remember the difference between Bitcoin and all the other coins is that Bitcoin, we control the monetary policy. It's not going to change. And with every single other coin, it's up to some small group of people who are going to, at best, do their best. And then the track record for that globally is
until
not
they
so
don't.
great. Until they don't.
Until they get
right?
corrupted in some other way.
Yeah, I mean, there's always this temptation to print more to fix the problems, right? Well, you can't do that with Bitcoin. Now, when we talk about other digital currencies, there is a digital currency phenomenon that I did want to talk to you about, and that's central bank digital currencies. So it appears that around the world, there's this drive to move beyond paper cash and to bring us to a system where citizens actually may have a liability of the central bank in their phone as opposed to using paper money. And this obviously presents a lot of civil liberties concerns. Even Christine Lagarde has said that the digital euro won't really have full privacy. Obviously, the Chinese government is pursuing an aggressive CBDC. These things are likely to lead to like forced spending, negative interest rates, confiscation, blacklists. So this is all happening. There's like this war on cash. What are your thoughts on this idea of like, financial freedom and privacy in a world that's moving beyond paper money?
I mean, I think all of the things that you mentioned in terms of what central banks are trying to do are just bumps in the road, and they're bullshit. We have a much better alternative in Bitcoin. We have designs for that that sort of privacy and that freedom within it. And the more we can, especially our governments can realize that and get in the boat sooner, the better off we all are.
All right, so we're going to wrap up. I have one more thing to say. Today, 32 years ago today, these incredibly brave students in Tiananmen Square stood up for freedom. Chinese people are still fighting that fight today, especially the Uyghur people, especially the Tibetan people, especially people in Hong Kong. We often hear that like Bitcoin is like a threat to America and is a threat to our values. But is it really? Like, isn't Bitcoin's free speech and property rights and sovereignty? Don't you think that like vibes better with our society than maybe like a closed communist police state? Like, don't you think that we're going to benefit a little more than maybe some other countries? Like, maybe could you even say Bitcoin is patriotic?
100%. But I mean, I think it benefits the entire world. I mean, that's what makes it incredible. Is like every single person in the world will benefit and get value from utilizing this. And the more accessible we make it, just that realization that we finally have a currency that can be traded to any single point on the planet is pretty incredible. And what that enables going forward is mind-blowing. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that happens.
Yeah, I mean, this concept that Bitcoin is for everyone is, I think, what I want you to go home with. Bitcoin is non-discriminatory. It cannot choose who uses it. And none of you can block our access or her access or his access. It is something that's open for all of us, and it's open source. And I, as a human rights activist, am grateful that companies like Square are supporting the open source side of Bitcoin, are supporting non-custodial use, are supporting Lightning. These are things that I don't think may have been possible before Bitcoin's incentive structure. So I really wanted to thank you, Jack, for coming out and sharing your thoughts. It's obviously a tricky political situation out there, but I think we agree that Bitcoin is like the way forward here.
100%. It's the only way out.
Well, thank you all so much. I would thank you, Jack.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Appreciate you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.